Hello, I'm Sky Matsuhashi, founder of SmartPokerStudy.com, the place for poker players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Poker people, in episode 58, I discuss the Poker Tracker 4 HUD pop-ups that I created to maximally exploit my opponents. Hey poker people, thanks for tuning in, thanks for telling your friends, and thanks for spreading the word, because that's how we grow. And of course, there's Audible. Audiobooks are great for helping you get through those menial tasks like commuting, standing in line at the casino cashier, or washing your car. Audible has over 180,000 titles from leading audiobook producers. My listeners get a free trial to Audible and an audiobook of their choice when they sign up through my Audible affiliate at www.audibletrial.com/smartpokerstudy. And good news! They even have the mental game of poker on audiobook. Okay, on to the poker talk. Today is part 4 in what was originally a 3-part series. I received a couple emails, though, asking about color coding of stats, so we're going to discuss that and a little bit more in just a minute. But first, a quick recap. In part 1, that was episode 54, I talked about HUD essentials, and that was the 6 or 7 essential elements of your HUD in order to exploit your opponents to the max. In part 2, which was episode 56, I added some key statistics for maximum pre- and post-flop exploitation, and we dove into practicing your HUD in hand history reviews. In what was going to be the final part 3 last week, episode number 58, I discussed the power of pop-ups with your HUD. The HUD itself is great, but it's the pop-ups that really allow you to get in there and rip your opponent's game to shreds. So, today in part 4, like I just mentioned, we'll discuss color coding the stat percentages in your HUD, as well as make sure you've got a basic understanding of what the stat percentages tell you. I probably should have done this in the first episode in the series, but, whatever. Better late than never. Alrighty, make sure to hit the show notes for today's episode at smartpokerstudy.com/pod60 for everything I discussed today, and to sign up for the weekly newsletter. Last week's newsletter exclusive contained a walkthrough of one of my favorite pop-ups, the Steel pop-up, and I showed you how I used it through reviewing 4 different hands. This week, I'll show you how to actually go about creating some color coding ranges for your different stats. And of course, when you sign up for the newsletter, you get access to some exclusive content, like the Ultimate Poker Resource Guide, the Leak Plugging PDF, the 30-Day Poker Study Challenge Tracker, and many other valuable items. Now here it is, today's podcast mission. My mission for today is to teach you how you should think about the stat percentages in your HUD and color code them to make it quick and easy to find your opponent's frequency issues. So far in this series, I've discussed HUD usage for online poker. I gave you the essential elements that every HUD needs, as well as additional stats that you can use to exploit your opponents. I also talked about the pop-ups and why they're so useful, and I gave you some ways you can practice using your HUD. But we haven't really discussed how to understand and think about the numbers in your HUD. What does it mean when Robbie Robertson raises from the button maybe 75% of the time? What's it mean when Fitterfold Francis c-bets only 20%? And how strong is Debbie Double Barrel's range of hands when she's c-betting the flop and the turn 70% of the time? These are great questions, Sky. I'm glad you asked. I just said axed, and I meant to say that. I don't know how many people out there do this, but I often try to say words that make conversation fun instead of boring. I say things like shucks, darn, drat, schnitiously, howdy, and ain't all the time. And speaking of ain't, when somebody says to me, ain't isn't a word, I'll often respond in one of 2 different ways. I'll either say, did you understand what I said? Did it make sense? When they say yes, I say, well, I guess it is a word, seeing as how you understood it. Or the other thing I'll say is, hey, I ain't writing no essay here, and continue on with whatever I was talking about. But, enough of my undeniable understanding of the English language. Let's get back to poker. Like I was saying, Dems, some great questions. So let's go ahead and discuss how we can interpret the numbers we see on our HUD. The first step to understanding the stats we see on the HUD is understanding percentage form. This is a term that I first heard from Split Suit. And if you don't know him, just go to YouTube and search for Split Suit, all one word, and you'll find tons of awesome poker strategy videos that he's created. So percentage form is a shorthand way to describe a range of hands. Instead of saying he 3-bets jacks or better and ace king, you can just say he 3-bets 3%. And someone versed in percentage form will understand that. The percentage form is found when you use a program like Equilab, Flopzilla, or PokerStove. If you've never used one of these before, I recommend getting Equilab from pokerstrategy.com. It's a free program for range analysis, and I've talked about it before. Not only range analysis, but it's also good for hand versus hand, or even hand versus range equities and analysis. You can find a link to download Equilab in the show notes. So in Equilab, you can enter in a range of hands, and it'll tell you the percentage of hands that comprises. As you test this out, you can see there's a huge difference between, say, a 10% range and a 50% range of hands. And understanding this is very useful for hand reading. If a player only plays, say, 3 out of every 10 hands dealt, then you know they play 30% of hands. Of course, the 30% is much looser than playing only 1 out of 10 hands, or 10%. So you can adjust your strategy based on how often they play hands. And this is what the HUD does for us. It gives us the percentage of how often somebody does something, which helps us be more technical players rather than feel players. Knowing how often they perform certain actions, which tells us the likely range of the hands they're doing it with, helps us to make plans and develop plays to combat them. And if you aren't familiar with percentage form yet, get one of the programs I already mentioned and start messing around with it today. And go out there and just test out different ranges and see what percentages they equate to. With enough percentage form practice, you'll be able to visualize what hands fall within a given percentage. Now that we have a good understanding of percentage form, let's use that understanding to dissect some very telling stats, namely pre-flop raise, 3-bet, and Cbet. So pre-flop raise is the percentage of the time that a player put in any raise pre-flop. It's a nice and simple stat, but the information you can extract from this percentage is very powerful. This stat tells us how aggressive the opponent is. Let's say our opponent only has a pre-flop raise, or I'll just say PFR from now on. Let's say he has a PFR of 5%. What does this mean? Well, it means he only raises 5% of the time, or 1 in 20 chances. That sounds pretty darn non-aggressive and very nitty to me. If you use Equilab and start entering hands in until you get to a 5% range, what's it look like? Well, it's only 7s or better and ace-king. He's not raising ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen, or even deuces through 6s, so he's probably just limping these strong hands. Contrast this with an opponent who raises 30%. This is so many more hands. First off, it's 6 times more often than the nitty player we just discussed, so it's actually 6 out of every 20 chances. And if we plug in hands until we get to 30%, it's the way I did it. It's any pocket pair, ace-5 suited or better, ace-8 offsuit or better, suited 8s and offsuit 9s where the other card is greater, like king-8 suited or queen-9 off, and suited connectors 5-4 suited and suited gappers 6-4 suited or better. And that is a crazy amount of hands compared to that measly little 5% range. And a lot of those hands are not strong at all. You know, if somebody's raising with 5-7 suited, great, more power to him, but that's a good guy that you can target with a nice little 3-bet there. And so that whole thing we discuss is percentage form in action. It's looking at a stat and being able to understand what range of hands it correlates to. So let's take this info and look at another very important stat, the 3-bet stat. This stat tells us how often the player decided to 3-bet pre-flop. It's another stat that looks at a player's aggression, and the percentage we see here is very telling of what kind of player they are. You'll often encounter people who only 3-bet 2 to 3% of the time. So let me ask you a question. What hands comprise such a small percentage? Another great question. Glad you asked, Sky. So 2 to 3% is jacks or better and ace-king. That's it. So when this guy 3-bets, it's for value only. Now, let's contrast this with somebody who 3-bets 6% of hands. Open your Equilab and plug in hands until you get to 6%. What did you find? Well, I found that it's 9s or better, ace-queen and king-queen. Okay, so this player is loosening up a bit over the 3% 3-better. Now let's contrast this 6% with a whopping 12% range for 3-betting. Well, that's a whole lot of hands to 3-bet, and it looks like this. It's 5s or better, Ace 10 or better, and King Jack or better. Now, that's getting aggressive with lots of hands that aren't really doing so for value, so a guy who raises this much or 3-bets this much might be a good target for a good 4-bet bluff or semi-bluff. Now, stat percentages tell you how often a player does something, but doesn't always correlate to a range of hands. Let's look at the Cbet stat now. Cbet, or continuation bet, tells us how often the player bets at the flop, given that he made the last raise pre-flop. So a Cbet of 20% means he bets the flop as the pre-flop raiser only 2 out of every 10 times. A Cbet of 70% means he bets the flop 7 out of 10 times. That's a huge difference, and one is obviously more aggressive than the other. But what do these two percentages really tell us? Well, we know that most ranges only quote-unquote hit the flop about 33% of the time. And by hitting the flop, I mean flopping a solid hand or a nice draw, like a flush draw or an open-ended straight draw. We know this by using a program like Flopzilla that shows us how often a range of hands will hit flops. In the show notes, I included a screenshot of Flopzilla showing how a 25% raising range hits the flop only 34.2% of the time. So if your opponent has a Cbet higher than 33%, you know he bets when he doesn't hit the flop well, and the higher the percentage, the more often he's bluffing. If the Cbet is below 33%, then you know he's fit or fold and only fires when he hits the flop really well. Alrighty, I hope that was edumacational for some of you out there. Any questions? No, so let's continue. I know you'd like to play online poker in the US or wherever you are, and America's Card Room is the site to play at. With lots of tourneys, cash games galore, 27% rakeback, and a 100% first deposit bonus of up to $1,000, it can't be beat. Just use offer code SPSPOD in all caps. Enter the code, create your account, make your first deposit, then email me your newly minted ACR screen name, and I'll send you a special gift. And soon, we'll be holding weekly free rolls exclusive to my listeners. So get in on the action and open your own America's Card Room account today by clicking the banner in this episode's show notes or go to smartpokerstudy.com/ACR for more details and to get 27% rake back by using offer code SPSPOD. Alright, so let's get to the good stuff that a lot of you are waiting for. Color coding for the win. A great feature that Poker Tracker 4 allows you to do is to customize stat ranges and font colors for each and every stat in the HUD. Color coding the percentages helps to quickly spot frequency issues in your opponent's game. For example, let's look at the first stat we talked about today, PFR, or pre-flop raise. I use a red, yellow, green, orange color scheme for my stat ranges. Red designates nitty stats, yellow is for reg stats, green is for fishy, and orange is for beyond fishy, like lag or Donksville numbers. So my own color coding ranges for pre-flop raise are 0 to 8% and color-coded red, which denotes a nitty player who raises infrequently. 8 to 18% and color-coded yellow to denote a reg player who is raising somewhere in the range that's considered to be optimal. 8% is on the low end, 18% is getting up there towards a little bit laggy play. 18 to 24% and color-coded green, which denotes a player getting too loose and aggressive with the hands they choose to raise. And 24 to 100%, and those are color-coded orange to denote a lag or a very donkish player. Another way that color coding helps to spot frequency issues is when two different stats have opposite colors. For example, if their flop Cbet is green, which is high and fishy or aggressive, and their turn Cbet is low and red, which is nitty, then you know the opponent is turn honest and only bets here with the goods. This is like an opponent with a Cbet of 70% on the flop and then only 30% on the turn. Target these players and take it away from them when they check the turn. And there isn't a right or wrong way to color code your ranges. It's just your opinion and whatever helps you exploit opponents. I've chosen a 4-color combo scheme with 4 ranges because 3 just wasn't enough. For a lot of stats, it wasn't enough. And 5 or more is just too many for me to focus on and differentiate. The red, yellow, green, orange aspect makes intuitive sense to me as well. Of course, you can break this down to whatever you prefer. You could break your color ranges down 5 ways, something like 0 to 10%, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and 40 to 100. Whatever feels right to you, just do it. Ultimately, though, what I recommend you doing is writing down each stat in your HUD and on a scale of 1 to 100, give thought into the ranges that comprise a nits, a regs, a fishes, and a lags ranges. So I just gave you my color coding ranges for PFR. Now let me give you my color coding ranges for the other two stats discussed today. So for 3-bet, 0 to 6% is red, 6 to 9% is yellow, 9 to 16% is green, and 16% or more is orange. And for Cbet, 0 to 50% is red, 50 to 66% is yellow, and 66 to 100% is green. Alrighty, and another part of color coding to make stats more user-friendly and quick to identify is background colors and font sizes. I increase the font sizing of the most important stats in my HUD, namely stack size and BBs for my MTT or sit-and-go HUDs, and also as well as VPIP and PFR for all the HUDs. Increasing the size draws your eyes to them, and being that these stats are so important, I want my eyes drawn there every single time. The other thing I do is color code the backgrounds of stats that work well together. For example, if you go to the show notes and take a look at the screenshot of my 6 max sit-and-go and MTT smart HUD, you'll see the following. Steal-related stats all have a black background. Raise first in, fold to 3-bet, and 4-bet are all teal. Calling 2-bets and 3-bet stats are dark gray. Cbet flop and turn stats are green, and fold to Cbet flop and fold to turn Cbet stats they're on kind of an olive background. So ultimately, it's up to you to make your HUD as user-friendly as possible, and the goal should always be to make it so your HUD helps you exploit your opponents. That's why you're using the HUD after all. Challenge! Here's my challenge to you for this episode. Create some of your own color coding ranges for the most important stats in your HUD. I recommend doing this for the stats mentioned today, as well as attempt to steal, fold to Cbet, number of hands played, and of course, VPIP. Take the time to create these on your own, giving careful thought to what the percentages mean. Use Flopzilla, Equilab, or some other software to aid you in this process. This practice of thinking about each individual stat and what the possible percentages mean will be great for your ongoing poker development. Now it's your turn to take action and Scooby-Dooby-Doo something positive for your poker game.
Now get it on!
So to recap it, I discussed percentage form and how understanding this helps you to read the percentages on your HUD. We also covered understanding the percentages of 3 of the most important stats on your HUD, which were PFR, 3-bet, and Cbet. Then I covered how to think about color coding your stats for quicker reference and to help you spot frequency issues in your opponents. And to help save you time in customizing your own HUD, my smart HUD for Poker Tracker 4 is for sale. If you purchase it, you'll get 3 different HUDs for cash, 6 max MTT or sit-and-goes, and 9 max MTT or sit-and-goes. You'll also get 6 different pop-ups to really help you exploit your opponents. And all of my color coding is already in place for you. Use smartpokerstudy.com/smarthud30 for 30% off my new smart HUD for Poker Tracker 4. And if you don't have Poker Tracker 4 yet, you can get a free 30-day trial by using my affiliate link. You don't have to commit or make a purchase, and going through me helps to support the show. And I love the support. Visit smartpokerstudy.com/pokertracker4, all one word with the number 4 at the end, to be taken directly to the Poker Tracker 4 website where you can download your free trial. If you decide to purchase it through me, go back through this same link again and email me your purchase confirmation and I'll send you my smart HUD for free. If you ain't there already, head on over to the show notes at smartpokerstudy.com/pod60 for everything mentioned today and to sign up for the weekly newsletter for poker strategy exclusives. Thank you so much for listening today. I love feedback, so hit me with it through the show notes, or you can also send an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, tweet me at smartpokerstudy, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And please send me your questions, your leaks, or ideas for podcast topics through all the channels just mentioned. And I have got a quick iTunes review. This one comes from BB3M. He titles it, "The Hammer in Your Poker Toolbox 5 stars. The pod is well made and greatly entertaining. Sky gives you poker knowledge you need to be successful. My #1 podcast." All right, that's so awesome, BB3M. Thank you so much for that. I totally appreciate it. And for everyone else, I love it when you give me some good reviews. So if you want to let me know how you feel about this podcast, please leave an iTunes, a Stitcher, a Google Play Music review, or just email it to me. That works as well. Alrighty, poker people, be sure to come back this Friday for another Q&A, where I lay down some awesome answers for your killer questions. Of course, word of mouth is the best advertising, and I thank you for sharing this show with other poker people. It only grows with your help, so I'm asking you to share it with someone who will get value from it just as you do. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.